Good morning. This is an IELTS speaking mock test taking place at B-GHUD Academy, Mavelikara. My name is Abhishek Sajimati. I'm your speaking examiner for today. My ID number is 563221. The IELTS speaking test is divided into three parts. Before each part, I shall give you a brief introduction. Before we begin the actual test, may I know your full name, please?
My name is Joshua Shaji.
And how may I call you?
You can call me Joshua.
Joshua, can I see your identification document, please?
Sure.
Thank you. There you go, Joshua. Thank you so much for that. Joshua, how are you feeling today?
I'm fine, just a little nervous.
It's all right. Without wasting further time, let's move on to part 1 of your speaking test. Here in this session, you can expect a lot of personal questions. Okay? Let's begin this part by talking about your hometown. Joshua, where are you from? Could you please talk about your hometown?
Sure. I'm from this place called Puthangav, which is in Chenganur. Chenganur is actually in the Alapura district. Yeah.
All right. And do you have a lot of tourist attractions in your hometown?
I might not say a lot, but we do have some. And in fact, there's a hospital, an Ayurvedic hospital near my house. And that's pretty famous, and I see a lot of tourists and foreigners around there. And then there are other places like temples and other cultural places.
All right. And Joshua, do you wish to make any changes in your hometown in the near future?
The only thing I feel is missing is probably advancements or like great technological advancements, and maybe even a few more restaurants wouldn't be so bad. And yeah, that's about it.
All right. And Joshua, do you think your hometown is an ideal place for youngsters to grow up?
Actually, right now there are a lot of youngsters in Chenganur because Chenganur is famous for its Christian college, and they also have an engineering college in Chenganur. So it already is a place where a lot of youngsters are being brought up there, and college students as well.
Right. Okay, Joshua, now let's talk about making plans. Do you like to plan your day in advance?
I do. I wouldn't say that I don't like it, but I'm not always successful at it. That's
All right. And what do you think is the toughest part about making a plan?
It's probably the execution part of it, because sometimes things are not as you plan it, and you might have to improvise, and then execution might be harder or might be not as you expected.
All right. Joshua, now we shall talk about numbers. Do you have anything like a favorite number?
Actually, I do. And I would say that my favorite number is 7. I wouldn't call it a lucky number exactly, but it's just one of my favorites because my birthday is on the 17th of December. And probably that has something to do with it. I'm not really sure. But yeah, I've really had something towards the number 7.
All right. Okay, and are you good at remembering phone numbers?
Right now, I don't use that a lot, or I don't have to remember. But then when I was younger, before I had a smartphone or even a mobile phone, I used to remember all my family members' numbers and relatives, and sometimes even friends. Yeah, so I wouldn't call myself bad at remembering numbers.
All right. And do you deal with a lot of numbers daily?
As a matter of fact, I do, because at work, what I do is digital marketing and lead generation, basically, and that involves a lot of numbers and a lot of contacts and databases. Yes, so I do, or numbers do play a huge part in my life right now.
All right. Joshua, now let's talk about driving. Do you like to drive a car?
I love to drive a car, and that's one of my favorite activities. And if you'd allow me to say, I just returned after a long drive with a few of my friends. We had visited a neighboring state, and we just I really enjoyed the driving part of it.
All right. And at what age do you think children should be allowed to drive?
I think 18 is not a bad time for children to start driving, or adults now that they're 18. Yeah, so 18 is appropriate according to me.
All right. Do you think people will drive more in the future, or do you think they might rely on public transportation more?
Considering what's happening right now, there are people who like to drive, but the people who like to drive manual cars right now, manual transmission cars right now, are much lesser than those who drive automatic cars. That's because people are just confined to getting more convenient, and they just everybody is looking at convenience right now. So probably if people get a chance to have automated driving, people would prefer that than physically driving, like in the future.
All right. Okay,
Right.
Joshua, that is the end of part one. Now let's move on to part two of your speaking test. I shall now give you a topic, and you will have to speak about it for 1 to 2 minutes. You will have 1 minute time to prepare an answer for your topic. You can use the pen and paper in front of you to note down some points if you wish to. Also, don't worry about when to start or when to stop. I shall tell you when to start, and I will tell you when to stop. There you go. That's your topic.
Thank you.
You're requested to talk about a time when you first talked in a foreign language. The sub-questions are: when was it, who was with you, and how you felt about it. Joshua, you now will have 1 minute time to prepare an answer for this topic.
Thank you.
Joshua, your time is up. You may start speaking now.
All right. The language I would like to talk about right now, considering these questions, is French. And when I spoke or talked in French for the first time was in my class, which I mean, during my schooling in my class. That was just how to introduce myself and things like that. And I didn't really have a conversation with anyone, but it was mainly just speaking. And yeah, that's so who I was with were my classmates. And to be frank, if I'm asked how what I feel about the language, I'm not so fond of it, or I'm not good at it, is something that I could be more specific about. And the language is great, and it's the language of romance and a lot of things like that. And it's also, I've also heard that French is the second most popular language after English. And yeah, so that's all I feel about the language, but I'm not so confident in French at all.
Okay, Joshua, that is the end of your time. You can stop now. And Joshua, do you use this language every day?
As a matter of fact, I don't, because like I said, I'm not so fond of the language myself, because I'm not so good at it. But yeah, I felt that that would be the appropriate language to talk about for this topic.
All right. Okay, Joshua, that is the end of part 2. Now let's move on to part 3 of your speaking test. And here on this session, you can expect a lot of general questions. Okay? Right. Joshua, do you think children should be taught to read, write, and speak in English at a very young age?
Since we're living in a global world, and a world with a lot of opportunities around the globe, I would highly suggest that students or children are taught English, the global language, at a young age itself, even to speak, read, and write, because even if they do not know another language, if all students or children are taught one single language and they are probably good at it or even know it, communication wouldn't be that hard or even as hard as it is right now.
Okay, Joshua. Don't you think that if we instill English into our education system, it might pose a threat to certain regional languages?
Um, I would certainly, in my opinion, I would disagree with that because regional languages are spoken at home, and in whatever region it is, the language they speak at home is mainly the regional language. And there are people who speak in English at home, even for instance, in my neighbor's house, even though they're from Kashmir, they sometimes speak in English. I'm talking about my house when I was back there in Kuwait, so not here. But yeah, there are people who speak or the regional languages. I don't think would lose their value if students are taught English.
Right. Certain people, as you might be well aware, Joshua, especially youngsters, tend to imitate the Western culture alongside learning English. Do you think it has a positive practice?
That would be a very neutral thing because it does have a lot of positives, but it also does have negatives. Because some cultures, or all cultures basically have positives and negatives, but what we learn or what we choose to learn is based on us and that individual. So it depends on the discernment of that person, in my view.
Right. And Joshua, according to you, what other languages do you think are important apart from English?
Again, like I said before, I think French is a very important language, and a lot of parts in the UK and Canada do have a lot of French people, mainly Canada, I suppose. But yeah, French, I've also heard, is the second most popular language after English, like I had mentioned before. So French is an important language, and then maybe German, because education in Germany is pretty much free for the most part. But then the catch is that you need to know German. So yeah, German would be another important language. And yes, of course, I would also mention that Hindi is an important language because I'm an Indian and it is important to me.
Right. Do you think the most predominant language in your country will also gain a similar kind of popularity in the future and would be recognized as a global language?
Um, in my view, or according to me, I do not think at all that Hindi would be at that level of English, but yes, it is important and it does have its values and perks and things like that, but it might never reach the level of English because English is the language that is common in all countries, and Hindi is confined to India.
All right. And Joshua, do you think age is a factor when it comes to learning a new language?
Um, it does play a certain role, or it does play a role to an extent, in the sense when children learn languages, it's probably a little bit more easier for them to grasp. Their grasping power is probably more than those people who are older to them. And but yes, if you consider older people who do not or who are bored and things like that, for them to learn a language would be something to kill their boredom, but may not be as useful as it is for a child or a youngster.
Right. Joshua, when it comes to a regional language, let's consider two people from the same part of the world. Do you think that it is better for them to communicate in their regional language, or do you think it is better for them to communicate in English?
Well, that question I would have to say that it completely depends on them. Whatever they are comfortable with the most should be the language that they use, because there shouldn't be a barrier between understanding.
Right. Okay, Joshua, that is the end of your speaking test.
Right? Thank you.
The candidate has good pronunciation and his fluency was also excellent. However, he needs to work on improving his lexical resource. When it comes to IELTS speaking, topic-related vocabulary is something that is very important. A lot of students lack topic-related vocabulary and they keep on repeating the same words over and over again, which should be avoided. Also, in part 2, the candidate deviated from the topic, which can be a serious hit on coherence. When it comes to part 2 of your speaking test, it is very important to read the question carefully and then answer accordingly. Moreover, in part 2, it is always a better idea to start with an introduction rather than coming straight onto the topic. In part 3, the candidate stated a personal example for a general question, which again can be avoided as it might cause a problem with your coherence. Always remember that for a general question, it's always better to state a global example. As such, the candidate should work on improving his sentence construction as well. And he used a lot of "and" in between sentences. It is a good idea to use "and" for connecting two sentences or two ideas, but when it comes to a fresh idea, it's always a better thing to start a fresh sentence.